So question for the group. How many generations do you think are in today's workforce? Throw out a number. I hear a lot of fives and a lot of fours. You're correct. Today, we have 4 generations in the workforce. And the reason being is people are working longer. They're retiring later. So more than ever before, we have a tremendous amount of diversity, not only in background and experience, but in age as well. And what that means is that each of these generations have their own communication preferences. They use technology differently. Each generation has their own channels of communication that they prefer. And the younger the generation, the more technology you see rolled into those communication preferences. And so what happens is a technology tension is created in the workplace because we all have different preferences in terms of communication style and how we incorporate technology with it. And what happens is that then begs the question, is there a right or a wrong way to communicate? Is one generation more accurate than another in what's appropriate?
And so you may wonder how ethics and integrity kind of weave into this equation. And in my role, particularly as ethics officer, most of what I have to deal with in terms of integrity is around behavior. It's around perceptions, right? I mean, society's norms kind of dictate what's ethical and what is unethical. And when we drift outside of those norms, someone's integrity may be called into question, or at least their credibility. So you have like one end of the dial where a particular communication may be perceived as subversive or maybe trying to skirt a rule, whereas just the day-to-day on the other end of the dial is just misunderstood. And so sometimes when you get to those disconnects, particularly between generations, you get to perceptions of one generation versus another of the integrity or the credibility of a particular sender of that communication, right? So where someone may have an expectation around communication and it's not met, they may start to become frustrated. Okay, thanks, John. But anyway, what happens with communications that are exchanged between generations? Invariably, there are going to be those like me that like to speak or write and complete sentences and potentially frustrate others in my office. And I'm starting to adjust to that because I want to be effective in who I'm communicating with. I don't necessarily want the receivers to have to adjust to my style. But we get all kinds. I have a friend who's very, very successful. I would say he's an excellent communicator, but his texts are constantly, they're just misspelled. It's just, and then at the bottom it says, please excuse, this may have been dictated. So you get those. But what's preferred, what's acceptable, and what's annoying to some? We have the whole spectrum, right? That's what we're into now, particularly within the workplace. So, one generation may perceive the others as lacking in integrity. Integrity is kind of a strong word, but maybe it's more credibility. And if we're not interacting with those individuals face to face, and all we see are their emails or their texts, don't we start to form an opinion about the sender? It may be completely inaccurate. And how refreshing is it when you finally meet that person and they're very articulate? It bears no resemblance to how they communicated either through text or email. But it's their style, and it may have something to do with their generation. So here's where we really get to the rub, because if you're stubborn about this, and you really feel like the way that you're communicating is the right way, you may be creating disconnects all the time and not realizing it. And your credibility and possibly even your integrity might begin to be called into question. The other thing around timing, that is a point for me where I'm not necessarily somebody who's going to just bang out something real quick just because somebody sent me something and they need their answer right then and now. I'm more the kind of person that's going to continue what I was doing to remain focused and then stop and then respond. How many of us are like that? Going to keep going? Right. In fact, I'm a little annoyed that they try to text me right when I'm in the middle of something.
Right. And that's the challenge in this, is the different technology options come with different expectations of response. You don't necessarily expect an email to be responded to within 5 or 10 minutes. But if you send a message on an inter-office chat and you see the little green dot, they're there, they're at their desk. Why haven't they responded to me? It's been a minute. Or it's a text message. I can't tell you how many times I'll get an email from a client, I'll see it, as Jim said, I'm going to keep working on what I'm working on until I can take that pause. And by the time I'm ready to take the pause, I now also have a text message that says, did you see my email? Yes. But again, it comes to that tension, and how do we figure out, is there a right or a wrong response time? Is there a right or a wrong use of technology to communicate in the workforce?